Hello and welcome to the Legacy and Libations show, where we talk about life, death, and the beverages that get us through it. My name is Bill Soroka. I'm one of your co-hosts. I'm the author of Sign and Thrive, How to Make Six Figures as a Mobile Notary and Loan Signing Agent. And I'm here with my co-host, John Braddock. John, welcome. How's it going today?
It's going well. For those of you who don't know me, and I think many of you do already, I'm John Braddock, the author of Click Here When I Die, and the founder of My Life and Wishes, making things easier for those we love, because that's what it's all about.
Yes, it is. And that's one of the driving factors of a show like this. So thank you all for showing up here on a Wednesday, especially during your end of month. It's the last day of the month. I know it can get a little bit crazy and topsy-turvy. So thanks for making time with us. John, can you introduce our incredible guest today?
I would be honored. Today, we are joined by Marnie Blank. And Marnie is the founder of Begin with the End. She's a trained death doula, mediator, and recovering lawyer, which I want to dig into just a little bit, and female founder and small business owner. She completed her death doula training through Going with Grace, mediation training through New York Peace Institute, and elder decisions grief training through the Living Through Loss Counseling Society, and is NEDA proficient, which we'll have Marnie tell us what that is. Marnie's goal is to create a safe place to learn and talk about death, dying, and grief, which I'm so into, because most people would rather have a root canal than talk about their own death, right? Then includes the accountability and completing advanced care directives. We all know how important that is. And end of life planning, creating legacy projects, and facilitating conversations within the families. She brings deep compassion, active listening, and practical resources, as well as a healthy dose of humor to her work. And after all, as I always say, it's only death. Lighten up. Death and grief affect all of us. The more we connect with our families, communities, and ourselves, the less fear plays into these important discussions and decisions. She's written articles for Trust and Wills and Lantern. And now that I know she likes to write, she'll be writing for My Life and Wishes. And she is also a notary. So please welcome Marnie Blank.
Hi, everyone. I think it's funny that you said the thing about root canals. Both my parents happen to be dentists. And so I think I'm the only person who is not terrified of dental work from an early age, but yes.
Oh, nice. Well, your parents would never hurt, their child, right? So
only shame me if I didn't floss well.
Oh, too funny. Well, let's start out with, as I always ask, I mean, we all are passionate about what we do. There's always the why behind who we are. So let's start with, you were a lawyer and now you're a recovering lawyer. And what drove you into becoming a death doula?
Yeah, so I was a lawyer for about 5.5 years. I worked for a federal judge. I worked for a New York City agency. And I ended up kind of wishing my day away every morning. I would wake up and just not be excited about what I wanted to do. And one shouldn't do that. As we know, life can be short. We don't know. So I didn't want to take that risk and end up doing something I didn't want to do for the rest of my life. And so after some eat, pray, loving, backpacking around the world for about 8 months, I came back. I got into real estate. I started a small business with my sister, which we still operate on the side for the last 7 years. And so what really triggered my interest in death and dying is I was hosting an event at I have a rental photography studio and event space in New York City. I was at an event and I got a call from the hospital that my mother had gotten into a freak car accident. And the first thing that went through my brain in that moment was not, is she okay? It was, Oh my gosh, I have all of her paperwork sitting on my counter that I was supposed to get signed or notarized or witnessed, and I hadn't. And like I said, I'm a lawyer, I'm smart, I'm organized, I know how important this is. And I had some kind of mental block around dealing with this paperwork that had to do with, my mom's eventual death. And so I scrambled, I got on a train, I got to the hospital, and I will save everyone the suspense. I know there is okay. But in the ensuing months of having to deal with a police report and getting her into a rehabilitation center, dealing with pets, dealing with mail, all of the things that happen, whether you are, whether you've passed away or have a serious illness going on, it was very overwhelming. I have a sister who's amazing, and we each have like very good things that things that we're good at. I am better at logistics and paperwork and getting shit done, for lack of a better word. And my sister's good at setting the mood and making sure someone is cared for in that way. But I didn't know where to start. I went on the internet and I felt completely overwhelmed with how to do caretaking, how to, just start dealing with everything. And so it really got me thinking about how to help support people at this stage. And so I ended up getting my death doula training in 2020. And for those who don't know, a death doula is a non-medical professional who helps with the practical, logistical, spiritual, and emotional components around death, dying, and grief. So people think death doula, they think, oh, it's only the end of life. And that is for some death doulas, some just sit bedside at the very end. And are a support to family who can, set a good mood in the room, just be an active presence, a healing presence. And then there are people who also do end of life planning, helping with advanced directives, helping organize the estate, making sure that they do have their digital estate locked and loaded, have, everything organized. And then also doing legacy work, helping really think through how do you want to be remembered? And that's not something that just starts when you're in your elder years. That's something that starts now. And if you know how you want to be remembered, are you living a life in alignment with that now? And if not, how can you get there? And so I love all aspects of this, and really trying to take a taboo subject, something that feels very dark and scary and uncomfortable, and helping families have these conversations, helping make sure that, youngish and healthyish people have their paperwork done and organized, but also helping to have those more difficult conversations with our family members to make sure they do, as we all know what happens if they aren't. So that's kind of how I got into it. Yeah.
Wow. So how do you approach conversations about death and dying with individuals or particular family members who might be uncomfortable with that?
Yeah, you sort of have to read the room and take someone where they are. Some people are very open and some people are more closed, and that can be from religious backgrounds, it can be from personal upbringings, and it's really meeting people where they are. So oftentimes, I will coach, if it's a family member wanting to talk to their parent or sibling or anyone about it, offering up something that they're doing for themselves. So like, I just talked to someone about my end of life planning, and I started to think about, where I want to be buried. Is this something that you've thought about? Kind of bringing it back to yourself first, so that it opens up the conversation, that it's not just about that person. It's really like a joint conversation. But also, there's a lot of different resources out there that you can use to start conversations. There's something called the Death Deck. It's kind of like a game to kind of get conversations going. There is something called the Conversation Project that offers, it's such a great tool.
The
Yeah.
Death Deck, it's awesome tool. Anyone it really helps you have conversation and think about things. I've tried to figure out how to actually make it more of a drinking game, but
I
that's
think you're
I
in the right
I
place, John.
that's I love that. They actually just came out with a new deck called the EOL, the End of Life deck, that has more conversation starters. But there's something called the Conversation Project, and they offer a lot of great ways in which to start having those conversations. But really, it's just making it casual and then not feeling frustrated if someone's not just ready to talk about it now. Starting small and then just continuing to have conversations and making it more part of everyday life. Death is now something that I regularly talk about in my family, and they are very reciprocal. It's now something, the more you talk about it, the less scary it is, or less like uncomfortable it is. And so just starting to make it part of the routine frees up a lot of space for people to open up.
It's interesting because you mentioned, sitting bedside and those kind of things, and, making family comfortable. And I know, it's not just for the dying, right? The approach, but it reminds me of when, during COVID, when my mother-in-law passed and she ended up in hospice. And in hospice, obviously there's no medication. They just make people comfortable and help them pass. But I remember some of the staff there, and I don't know if any of them were trained death doulas or whatever, but just the compassion that those people had. When my mother-in-law passed and we walked out, it was like, I have no idea how these people do that, but thank God they do what they do, because it made it so much easier on our family.
Oh, I'm so glad you had a good experience with hospice. I think hospice is such a great resource for families, and oftentimes only utilized at the very, very end, but really it can be brought in earlier to give that support. It's typically 6 months or less, but oftentimes, people decide on hospice really in the last week. But having that support, having someone who's coming even for a few hours, a couple of times a week, to just sit and offer some respite to the family and also comfort to the person who's dying, is such an amazing thing. And death doulas sort of work in tandem with that. There's only so many hours that their volunteers can do, and a death doula can sort of step in and be part of that team and be part of that care for the family.
Marty, I heard you speaking earlier too, it sounds like a death doula or an end of life doula, it doesn't necessarily, there doesn't have to be a trigger, an end in sight necessarily for the conversation to start. When should, or how and when does a person hire or engage with a death doula?
I have clients right now who are 29, and I have clients who are 55. It's really, where are you in your process of processing that we all die someday? And most of the time people come to me because something has happened, whether they've had a family member who's passed and they've had a bad experience and they don't want to have that again with another parent, or that they don't want that for themselves. I get a lot of young parents who haven't yet set up a will for their family, but knowing that they need guardianship over their children if something happens. So I get a lot of people who come in at different life events. So life events can be marriage, divorce, having a baby, having some sort of diagnosis, having a family member who's going through something and you're starting to be a caretaker, starting to make more money, and having assets. All of these are sort of trigger trust and estates planning, and that's where I step in also. Something that I do a lot is help people, guide people through all of the end of life planning, which can include the advanced directives, the trust and will, and really explaining and dumbing down and being a support before or during the process of hiring an attorney or an insurance broker. Because I don't know, I am an attorney by background, and I am very intimidated by lawyers that I don't know that area of the law, and I might not ask or know what to ask. And so I'm sort of the person that can help them go through all of the question marks and offer the time so that they have the space to, let's say for a healthcare proxy or their executor, who is going to be that person, but who's the best person for it? And then did you have the conversation to get consent instead of springing it upon someone who may not want that responsibility? So it's kind of taking the steps to make sure that not only do they understand everything, but they've had those important conversations with anyone who's going to be involved.
And to get to that point, Rhonda asked the question a little earlier, even in the chat, on the training that's involved, because and I think I'll phrase it like this, because for those who might be called to this kind of work, they've felt it and have been curious, where would they go? Where did you go for your training on this?
Yeah, there's a lot of great, I think since the pandemic, there have been a lot of people interested in it with collective grief within our world and society. A lot of people are starting to realize that this kind of support is needed. And so I went through a program called Going with Grace. It was a 4-month program. Then there were small groups. I finished my program in 2020. I still meet with my small group once a month. But you learn all different things within the death. You learn about the active signs of dying. How can you be a support to a family during that time? But you also learn about advanced directives, and you do your own advanced directives during those so that you know what it is that you're doing, and really thinking about what is a good death, and thinking about it for yourself and dealing with whatever, I work in the field. It doesn't mean that I don't have worries or fears about the unknown. So it's really thinking about those. And then how to show up in communities that I might not know. I am not part of the Black and Brown community or the LGBTQ, but how can I show up in a way that is supportive to people that I don't look like, but that I want to be able to be there for. So there are so many different, there's also, you learn more about ritual, how to incorporate tradition, legacy projects. It's kind of a vast field, and then people sort of pick and choose what speaks to them, whether it's more logistical, whether it's more emotional or spiritual. Some just practice in, if someone is of a certain religious background, sometimes they only go into that. So there's all different kinds of avenues, but there are other ones, NIDA, which you said you were going to ask me about. That is an overlying organization, which I am never going to remember the name of the letters right now, the acronym, but that is a good one. There is Doula Givers. That's another one. There's a few. I can always email it to you, and you can give it out to anyone who is signed up for this. I'm happy to provide other resources for trainings.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I wondered too, involved in that training or outside of that training, how do you protect yourself or make sure your own emotional health stays strong when you're surrounded by this level of emotion and feelings?
Yeah, it's the funny thing is that people who go into this are mostly empaths, people who are sponges, me included. And so it is a real challenge, but I think you have to come into it with a sense of I'm doing what I can to help, and I can't take away pain, but I can offer solace. And for me, like I have a dog. I take my dog on long walks. I do self-care for myself. When I have too much on my plate, I set boundaries for taking on new clients. I think it's really checking in with self. And, sometimes a client may not even be a good fit for you, whether it's because you have a feeling that maybe it's, whatever, it's too close to you or your story or whatever it is, or someone else might have better training in that specific area. For instance, I was recently approached by someone, a young mother who was diagnosed with very late stage breast cancer, has kids, and may be getting divorced. That was a lot. And she wanted someone who was more of a maternal figure, I could tell. And so I referred her to someone who was able to give her that. Um, and it's not a competitive thing for me. I want someone to feel comforted. Like that's my goal. I want someone to feel supported, and hopefully I can be that person. But what I can't, I want that person to find support with someone else. And so that's ultimately my goal. But for self-care is really boundaries, and self-care is always the answer, I think.
Self-care is critical. It's interesting Bill asked that question. So when my mother-in-law was in hospice, and she was only there for 3.5 days, but during one particular period of time, I went out to have a cup of coffee, and I was sitting there, and one of the I guess managers there was having a Zoom meeting with a potential care worker to work for the hospice, and I could only hear one side of the conversation, but she was asking person on the other end of the Zoom what she does for self-care, and why is it important, and those kind of things, which really, when you deal with death and dying and you experience it and you see it so often, it has to take its toll on you. And unless is it yoga, is it meditation, is it taking the dog for long walks in the park? In my case, I love to hike, and so I go into the mountains here in Arizona, and just get a little bit closer to what maybe is heaven. I don't know.
Nature certainly is such a self-care, being in
Yeah.
nature.
So you mentioned and I mentioned hospice and the workers and stuff. So when you're working with a family, how do you collaborate with the other healthcare professionals, like the doctors and the nurses? Is there do they understand your role? And
Yeah, many understand. Palliative care is becoming so much more important these days. Comfort care, and they definitely welcome this kind of help. But it really is up to the family and the person, and it's really putting it back on them of what do they want, what do they need. Do they want someone who can advocate on behalf of the individual? Do they want someone who's separate and apart? Because we're not dealing with medications, we're not part of that. It's really a matter of family wishes in terms of how the collaboration happens. But most of the time people are very happy to have the support for the dying and for the family. It's such, for me, when I was going through my mom's illness, like what I realized was that when you're dealing with someone who's sick and you're dealing with all the logistics, you cannot be in grief, you can't be with the family. And vice versa. If you are so in grief, you just can't do logistics. And so having someone there to help manage that, whether it's helping with the grief or helping with the logistics, kind of softens the process for the rest of the care workers, I would say.
So here's an interesting thought. So, it's about death and dying, right? And so, and you do this and experience it. So can you share, like, not a bad story? I have a podcast called Estate Planning Nightmares. I don't want a nightmare. Okay. So can you share a success story or a particular situation that was like, very rewarding to you, and what made it meaningful to you?
Sure. Well, I'll offer two, which is one, I recently had a friend from growing up, one of my sister's close friends, whose mother was diagnosed with late stage pancreatic cancer. And I've created a workbook that helps people go through the 7 steps of end of life planning. And originally the daughter had reached out and just wanted me to sort of go over it so she understood what was happening. But when we got on the Zoom call, her mother was there, and her mother, who had really not been you know, not lucid, but she was in a lot of pain. And so she was not participating as much in family thing. And when she had someone like me asking questions like, how are you feeling? And how do you want to feel at the end? And what can we do to help you get there? She was really participatory. She really wanted to talk about it. She wanted to talk about, you know, what things in the house she wanted to leave to who, and you know, stories about, you know, the certain muffin tin, you know, people really open up. And so that was really rewarding to me to have the mother be involved, for both of them to be talking together, but with someone who could help facilitate the conversation. And then the other one is personal also, is that I have a 101-year-old great aunt on my mother's side, and I have a 100-year-old grandmother on my father's side. And I have created like a legacy, a living legacy list of questions. And with their consent, I've recorded their life histories and stories over a series of months. And I've collected it for both sides of the family so that everyone has those. And I heard stories, you know, I've listened to the same stories for my whole life, but I heard things I'd never heard before. I heard what they were most proud of, what were the challenges. I heard about, you know, boyfriends before my grandfather. You know, I got so many different little nuggets. And that was like, you know, one of the most beautiful things. They're both still here, so, you know, and I'm still collecting stories when I see them, but that was a project that was personally very meaningful to me.
Marnie, I can see the power of that for sure. Is that unique to you, or do other death doulas also do those types of legacy interviews?
A lot of them do. There are so many different ways to do legacy projects. One of them is capturing audio or visual. A lot of the times elders are very self-conscious about being on video. And so oftentimes audio is a more approachable way of doing it. But a lot of death doulas do that. A lot of them will do other projects, helping create or organizing photo albums, helping make recipe books of family recipes and making them so that the whole family can have them. I offer a service where we'll take family textiles, important clothes or fabrics, and create legacy quilts. My sister happens to be an incredible quilter, and so we collaborate, and she will create heirloom quilts for families out of important things. So there are many ways in which to share and pass down from the generations this kind of knowledge and meaningful history. There's so, you know, people, when they think legacy, they think money, and that is definitely a part of legacy, but it's not the only type, and it's not necessarily the most important.
There's so many different ways to do that. Yes, I love that. And we do have some questions from the audience. John, am I good to read a couple of these?
Let's do.
All right. These happen to be from my mom right now.
I love that. I love that your mom's on.
Speaking of legacy, does there seem to be a common concern among dying?
There are a few, and it's not ones that I have personally witnessed. I mean, I have witnessed, but someone who I'm not going to remember the name there was 5, and I'm not going to remember all of them, but one is regrets. Like, did you not, like, what didn't you do? What, you know, what were your regrets? Who didn't you say what you wanted to say to, you know, whether you loved someone, whether you wanted to forgive someone and didn't. Is there anyone that you need to forgive or ask forgiveness? That's a big one. No one ever, I mean, most people on their deathbed don't wish that they worked harder. It was that they did more things that they wanted to do and didn't wait for permission from society or permission from themselves. Those are a few.
And what about the families? What's their biggest concern at those times?
I think a lot of people don't say the thing that they want to say until it's too late. You know, people will, you know, families will squabble. I don't know if anyone saw Succession, you know, they all, you know, were so angry, and then caught in complete grief. But I think people don't say what they want to say within families or ask the questions. I think, to the point of what John does, like a lot of people are worried about offending our elders by asking questions about, do you have a will, or, what do you want with, your important things? But that's not, the goal is not to be greedy. It's to understand what a person wants, and not having those conversations set someone up for a disservice afterwards. As we all know, the horror stories when the family doesn't know where the money is, or doesn't know what the important, valuable things are, or doesn't know their wishes, then their wishes aren't understood. A lot of people don't know if their parents want cremation or burial, or a green burial, or they don't know if they want a religious ceremony or not. When the family doesn't have conversations, it leaves so much to question, and then it creates a burden on the loved ones.
Yeah, then on top of the grief, they're dealing with logistics and trying to figure things out. Yeah. Third question from my mom: what is the greatest joy when you do your work?
I think just helping people find peace, or in legacy projects, I really love talking to people about their life histories and just seeing their moments of remembering, or nostalgia, or thinking about their lives and what they're proud of. But what lights me up is just knowing that people feel taken care of, whether it means that they feel they have the support to get their end of life paperwork done, that they have that accountability partner, or whether it means that a family has had a difficult conversation, but they got through it and it wasn't as bad as they thought it was. But it's really just, feeling in community with everyone. This is the one thing that ties us all together. We all are born and we all die. And why can't we have open conversations about it? So it really is, what I love is walking into a room and people are like, oh, what do you do? And I say, I'm a death doula. People, when you say I'm an accountant, the conversation kind of stops. When I say I'm a death doula, people will automatically open up about something that's happened to them and their family. And they will tell me something deep. And I love skipping the small talk and talking about what is true and real and honest.
Wow.
It's interesting, back to the biggest concerns and the regrets and those things. I don't know if any, and I'm not from Texas, but I don't know if any y'all are country music fans, but there's a country singer by the name of Cody Johnson. Cody has a song that's called Till You Can't. And it kind of goes through, you can always put a ring on her finger till you can't. You can always go down to the river and do some fishing till you can't, with your father. And it goes through that whole thing. And so it's a really good song, and it's a good reminder. Every time I hear it, I think about my parents, who are dad's 91 and mom's 87. And, they're down in Florida, and it's like, man, I haven't been there in a while, and I really should go, because, you may get that phone call, you can always jump on a plane and get down there till you can't.
Till you can't. Yeah.
Completely. And on that, I think a lot of people started doing this during COVID, but now when I think about someone, when someone pops up into my head and I think about them, I call them or I text them.
Yeah.
Because why not, why not create those connections, even if I haven't talked to them in years. I really do try actively to do that now.
Yeah, I think
I have an
that's
idea
a gift right there. Follow your promptings.
I
John,
have an
what's your
idea.
idea?
I have a homework assignment for everybody, inspired by Marnie Blank. Before you close your eyes tonight and go to bed, at least send a text message to a person, a friend, a close person, that if they weren't here tomorrow, you would wish you had done that. Just send a message. Just say, hey, thinking about you, love you, whatever. Everyone do it. Is everybody in?
I love that.
Love it. All right, Rhonda has a great question for us too. She had a near-death experience and doesn't necessarily fear death anymore, but her question is, can a death doula be hired for the people we leave behind during the passing process? Interaction do you actually have with family members as a death doula?
Are you saying, do families hire you to be at the deathbed? Is that the question?
Rhonda, is that the question, or is it for even work after to help with the grieving afterwards? I don't know if she's typing it, or can you unmute and clarify? To help the grieving
Yes.
family members while I pass.
Yes. That is a lot of what death doulas can offer is grief support up to a certain point. And then, for certain types of grief, a therapist is often recommended, but I am trained in grief support, and a lot of death doulas are. Holding space for families in grief is a huge part of the process, and being able to get them through that initial stage so that they can start to work on everything else that is required of them. But absolutely, grief coaching, grief support is a big part. Being a solace to families, a lot of that includes helping create rituals or incorporating traditions, whether that is helping with the memorial, the eulogy, anything personal, writing letters, even if you don't send them to the person who's passed to say anything that was left unsaid. There are many ways to help someone get through grief. Yeah.
Potentially, how long on the back end might you work with family after the passing of a loved one?
Grief has no timeline. It can be as long as someone wants, or as little. It can be just the initial support afterwards to kind of help them in grief, but to help them with the logistics around what is actually happening, sort of explaining the active dying process, help create like a loving, warm space for the dying and for the people who are being left behind, helping create a memorial or a vigil that feels good. A lot of there's a new wave of people who are doing more home funerals or home memorials, where a death doula can help a family dress the body or wash the body in a ritual, basically, and have people come to the house to pay their respects before the body is taken away. There are all different kinds of ways in which to process, in the medical aspect of dying. People feel like it's a medical emergency. They'll call the ambulance, it will be taken away. Death is not an emergency. There can be time spent with the body to say goodbye, to, do whatever you need to do to say goodbye before the body is left and whisked away. And a death doula can help create that environment and lead someone through a ritual in that way as well.
There's so many aspects to this that I've never even considered. When you talk about your training, I mean, how long is that training? I'm thinking a little online class or something, but this is clearly way more involved. So how long was your training and the continuous training that you've done?
Yeah, my initial training was 4 months. It was quite intensive. And then there were small group sessions also, but then I've taken, continuing, if you will, continuing education, continuing ed on different aspects. And for me, I'm not someone who has of yet have done the aftercare for the body. And I'm not sure that that's something that I want to do. But one can, choose, there are people who just want to do that and just create those experiences for people. So you can find a death doula for the type of experience that you want to have.
Lorraine had her hand up. Lorraine, did we answer your question, or do you still have one?
No, actually, I was just going to type it in, but I'll go ahead and ask it now.
Yeah, please.
Just trying to form my thoughts. As a notary, I've been called over to the hospital and to hospice many, many times. And several months ago, there was one particular signing that was just really touched my heart. And I am just now starting to be in contact with the end-of-life doulas here in town
Hmm.
and meeting with actually Friday. So this is really perfect.
Hmm.
And wanting to develop some sort of a presentation to take to maybe churches or other organizations to help
Yes.
people understand why they need to do this. And I understand thoroughly what you're saying about the end of life, and they're so busy with the administrative part that they can't grieve. Have you done anything of this nature? Put together something to present to people to um, so they have an
Yes.
idea of what to do ahead of
Yeah.
time?
It's that first, I think that that's really great that you're reaching out to them and doing a presentation. I think religious facilities are a great way in which to participate and get an audience. Yes, there's a funeral home, and I'm in Brooklyn. There's a really amazing funeral home here. Honestly, it's so beautiful. I would have my birthday party there. It's quite a space, but I did a presentation there on end of life planning 101, and sort of getting people interested in it. I just did a panel with a financial planner and a trust and estates attorneys to explain how having all three can create a holistic experience for someone.
Mhm.
I am going to be talking with an elder community group in like a very specific neighborhood of Brooklyn. I'll be doing a Zoom for them, but I think collaborations with all different kinds of people in the industry
Mhm.
is so important, because you don't just need one. It takes a village. Honestly, it's like to raise a child, but also to die peacefully. And having people understand what's available to them in their community is so important.
So good. So you've found the people to be really receptive to this.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Great.
Surprisingly so.
Thank you. Yes. So we're going to start putting some thoughts together on Friday about what we might be doing. And I thought I'd, pick your brain a little bit and see what you've done. Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you.
I love that, Lorraine. I love how the synchronicity of the timing works out, but I also like that you're thinking in collaboration with this.
Mhm.
I think this is a niche in our particular community, especially with where our industry is, and we're, estate planning attorneys, there's an obvious collaboration, but now we've got this whole other realm in the end of life doulas that makes perfect sense for us too, especially in a heart-driven community like ours. So as we wind down here, Marnie, I wonder, what do you wish more people understood about death and dying?
I think honestly that it's just that we're not guaranteed a long life. And that one shouldn't wait till retirement to do the things that they love. Find the time now. I'm just a firm believer that if not now, when, because we're not guaranteed a long life. So find joy now and not wait.
Till you can't.
Exactly.
Yeah, love it. Powerful.
So
And I was saying to
as
John that his services, just to go into your services, I've sent his information to a lot of my clients, because it's so important to have your digital estate under, everything organized for your family, and to start having those conversations with families early. My family hears about it weekly. Where are the passwords? What do I need to know? So I think John's website is really great.
well, thank you, and upload those family recipes into the legacy vault, upload those videos that you record to family members for after into the video vault in the legacy vault. So there's the place to do it, and the time is now. While we can. Dementia can hit, other things, we forget about things, and we just start building it out. As a death doula, and it being relatively new, and what I do is relatively new because no one wants to talk about death things. How do you get exposure? How do you market yourself? Is it funeral homes, estate planning attorneys, a big billboard that says, hey, you're going to die someday and I can help you make it easier?
I haven't tried that one yet, but I will put that on the list. I have found that LinkedIn is very helpful, having workshops, things like this where people can just have open and honest conversations. Partnering with like-minded people within the field, so trust and estates attorneys, financial planners, accountants, assisted living centers. There are a lot of home health care companies that could use the extra help, but really networking with people within the community itself, because everyone, like I said, is doing a really important piece, and all of it cohesively is needed.
Well,
I'm
Bill, do
glad
we
you
have
asked that
any?
question.
Yeah. Do we have questions from the audience? Who want to raise their hands? We always love to see your faces. And
Well, I have a question because John, you kicked off the business component and the marketing. I'm curious if you don't mind sharing, Marnie, like what's it cost a family to hire a death doula? Like, what's that even look like?
Yeah, so it really depends on the death doula. A lot of people in the industry do a sliding scale. They'll offer sort of a below and an above, so that people can choose what feels right for them, and that works for lots of people. I offer an hourly rate for most of what I do, but with the caveat that if someone has a financial hardship, that I'm always, I want everyone to feel supported, and I fluctuate depending on the need of the person. For legacy projects, it's a little challenging to give it's not necessarily hourly. I usually do a project rate depending on how many hours it will take. But that's typically how it's done. But a lot of people don't charge at all because they feel like it's a heart-centered field, and they don't feel like they should, or people don't feel like they should be charged for it. But I am a firm believer that I'm offering a service. I'm a lawyer, I have training, and it's my time and my passion, and that deserves to be compensated just like any other profession.
Yeah, that's totally understandable. And when you pick a client or a client picks you, do you do like an initial consult or a chemistry check just to see if they're like, you can't just go to your website and just buy the service, right? There has to be some sort of feeling.
No, that's a great question. I have a 20-minute free consultation that I offer everyone. I want them to see how they feel about me and how I feel about them, and to make sure it's a good fit. I have a questionnaire that I want people to fill out to get a better sense of their needs, what they're looking for, if it's something that I can provide. And also to make sure that, if they don't fill that out, are they ready? A lot of people want to be ready and aren't, and it's finding people at the right time that they can commit to doing the work. It's a mutual relationship. We have to work together on it. So that's a big piece of it.
Huge. I'd imagine that's really difficult to say no to as well. In those situations, right?
It is, but sometimes you just get a gut feeling. I'm a firm believer in, I have a gut check. If something doesn't feel right, if someone doesn't feel right, I listen to that.
That was one of my earlier questions too. I just got a vibe from you, but how much does your intuition play in a role like this?
Big. Like I said, I'm an empath. I read people very well. And that that is really needed in seeing what someone needs, what they don't need. Oftentimes it's just sitting in silence with someone and knowing that you can be a safe space to hold space. It's not always about me or any doula sharing something or doing something. Sometimes it's just being and knowing when that's right. So it is a lot about intuition and what the family needs. And just also asking the right questions. I'm a trained mediator, asking a lot of open-ended questions, getting to the heart of the matter. Someone might, people aren't necessarily at their best at the end. And that's okay. People can be angry or sad or in pain. And it's being able to meet them where they are and be okay that not everyone is happy-go-lucky to die at the end.
Right.
Yeah.
Marnie, is this role that you play, is it something that is done only in Brooklyn? Are you in person with these, or are there referrals that you can receive from out of state? How can we support you?
Yeah, I do most of mine virtually, quite honestly. A lot of meetings with families, a lot of the end of life planning and organizing is virtual. If bedside is needed, that is within like the New York City area. But there are great resources, which I will send on to you, but there are a bunch of death doula directories. They're in every state. We are all out there. And I know several in different states that I can personally recommend, but also, yeah, there are some really great options all over the country. Specifically, I mean, there are big communities in Colorado, in Washington State, California, New York, but they're in every state. Yes.
Excellent. And so if somebody wanted to refer to you, can they refer as a death doula and as an attorney separately as well?
I'm not acting as an attorney with my clients, though I can explain all of the things. But that's one of my boundaries. That's my happy spot, is to not be the lawyer. But I also refer out to. I have a network of trust and estates attorneys, financial planners, accountants. Downsizing one's home. There's a ton of resources that I can offer, and people are welcome, even if they're not looking to use my services. Like, I'm happy to answer questions or give referrals to other resources that could be helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I'm going to post your website again in the chat if you want to connect with Marnie there.
And I'm going to ask a question that was posted.
Yeah.
So you indicated, and feel free to say no, but you indicated, the 4-month course. What's the typical, investment in a 4-month course to become a death doula?
Yeah, and there's now aftercare professional courses too, that I might take as well. But there are a bunch of courses, but I would say the average price for a 4-month course is somewhere between $1,500 and $3,000 for a course. And some are, on the lower end, those will be self-directed. There's video, there's homework. At the higher end, you have instructors and you have, people to ask questions, office hours, etc. So it does depend on the program that you choose. And get a feel for the one that feels good for you. Each one has a different vibe, just like every person has a different vibe. So you got to find the one that blends with you.
Very important. Wonderful. Any last minute questions for Marnie before we close out today's show?
My question is, what did we not ask that we should have asked?
Great question.
That is a great question. Oh my gosh, I don't even know. I think I think that the untapped thing that a lot of people don't think about is like what you were talking about, all of the accounts online, all of our footprints that are digital, and knowing where they all are, whether they're with LastPass or, and in addition to something like your service. But I think, in wills, you can have a separate executor for just your digital executor, someone who is specifically able to deal with your, closing your accounts if you don't want those Facebook, reminders, or, being able to get into your Gmail. There's so many different things, and you might not, my father is currently my executor. I don't want him to go through my Gmail or my personal Instagram. So I have a friend who is going to be that person. So that's just something to think about that a lot of people don't think about. And then the other thing that I think that people don't think about is that there are a lot of options now that are beyond for body disposition. People think that there's just burial and just cremation, that those are the two options. There's a lot more green options out there right now, and something that death doulas do is educate on that. But there, a lot of innovation happening right now in that space that's better for our environment. So being able to understand that there's more that we don't know that's going on right now, and that information is now out there.
Yeah. I can't wait to see where we go with this. And on some of these, it's fascinating. Cassie, thank you so much for being here. I see your hand up. Feel free to unmute, ask your question.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Great conversation. I wanted to ask, I know that you indicated at the beginning that you are a notary, and so I was wondering, do you handle the notarizations for your clients, or is that something that is referred out, whether it's with the estate lawyers, or how is that part handled?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't typically handle it myself. I just happen to be a notary from my lawyer days. But most of the time, if I'm working with someone over Zoom, so for instance, I'm working with a few people now, one's in California, one is in upstate New York, I am not physically present. And so they would need a notary, whether that's through an estate planner or whether it's a state's attorney or otherwise. But it's a great question. But no, normally I don't do it myself, and they have to get their own. And it's annoying for a lot of people. I know that's a thing.
So then notaries maybe reaching out to doulas might be an option as far as creating a connection there.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay, great. Especially with remote online notarization, don't have to be in the same location for some people in certain states. So great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Great question, Cassie. I love it. All right. Well, thank you, Marnie. I'm going to let John close this out, but I just wanted to say thank you. This has been a delightful conversation, and I've been looking forward to it. So thank you for being here with us. John, thank you for introducing us to Marnie, and I'll let you close out. Legacy and Libations.
Legacy and Libations. Well, thanks everyone for joining us again. We will be off the next 2 weeks. The National Notary Conference is next week, and I think one of the two of us is traveling the following week, but we'll be back and keep watching for it. Special thanks to Marnie for being with us. Her contact information is in the chat, so you can reach out to her with any questions. And I hope you all found this insightful, because I certainly did.
Yes.
Thank you all. Stay well.
Have a great 2 weeks. Thanks, Marnie.
Thank you.